Hey everyone, it's Devi Erickson, founder of the Institute of Authentic Tantra Education, and I wanted to hop on here real quick and talk about this article that was released last week about female ejaculation and squirting. So last week, an article was published regarding researchers asked a man to pleasure 5 women and blah, 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 see where the squirting comes from, etc., etc. And I have to tell you that this article does not give us any new information. It's the same thing that we have been teaching and sharing and knowing for at least the last decade, which is that usually that copious amount of fluid coming from the urethra at high peaks of pleasure comes from the urinary bladder. So what the study says is that they had these women empty their bladders, and then they injected a blue colored fluid into the bladder and then stimulated them until they squirted, and then what they squirted out was that blue fluid, so they deduced that it does come from the urinary bladder. And we know this. We know that there are 2 sources of ejaculate or emission that come from the urethra of people with vulvas and vaginas. One of those comes from the urinary bladder, and what these researchers once again confirmed is that the fluid is not pee, though there may be some urine mixed in there, depending on how long it's been since you emptied the bladder and how long you've been stimulated. So it's not urine, so we know it comes from the urinary bladder, but that fluid is not urine, though it may have some traces of urea in it. The composition, the chemical composition is different than that of urine. So we know that. We also know that this fluid passes through the urethra, which is surrounded by spongy erectile tissue called the periurethral sponge, which has tiny glands embedded in it. And we know that as it passes through the urethra, it often picks up prostate-specific antigens, PSAs, which are produced in the glands that are in the periurethral glands, which are in the periurethral sponge. That is actually the source of true female ejaculate, that periurethral sponge, and those tiny glands that are there actually do produce a fluid that is homologous to prostatic fluid in people with penises. So that the periurethral sponge is often referred to as the female prostate, and it does create prostate-specific antigens, which are expelled again through the urethra, but in small amounts. So there's 2 types of urethral emission. There's the urinary bladder discharge, which is often copious amounts of fluid, squirting, and then there's actual female ejaculate, which is prostatic fluid, which comes out in smaller amounts, and it's thick and white and a little bit viscous. So there's two types of female ejaculate through the urethra. But there's actually 4 types of female ejaculate. There's 2 urethral emissions, and then there's 2 vaginal emissions. And we refer to the vaginal emissions as gushing and creamy cum, divine essence of woman. So we're glad that Western researchers are finally catching up to what many of us in the field already know, because we experience this from our own bodies. And if you want to learn more about the 4 different types of female ejaculation, we encourage you to head on over to Authentic Tantra and join our Female Orgasm Intensive membership program. For only $30 a month, you can learn the 15 different types of female orgasm, the 4 different types of female emission, and how to become your own sacred sexual healer using the methods of Authentic Tantra.